joining us today is Janet Pogue McLaurin, Gensler's Global Director of Workplace Research, to discuss her firm's recently released workplace survey, which is based on responses from more than 2,000 workers in 10 industry sectors who have returned to their offices at least some of the time. Welcome, Janet.
Glad to be here.
Janet, let's start off by talking a little bit of kind of what the state of the union is right now here. After years of AEC firms emphasizing the need for office design that promotes greater worker collaboration, your survey finds that workers are still spending anywhere from a third to a half of their time working alone and are seeking quiet and tech-free zones. How does Gensler interpret these responses?
Well, we've seen a big shift in the role of the office. Throughout the pandemic, we conducted 11 different workplace research surveys, 6 alone in the US at different points of the pandemic. And we were trying to understand how the pandemic was shaping our expectations and the role of the workplace. And during that time, the top ranked reason that people really wanted to come into the return to the office was working in person with my team and colleagues. And we saw this consistently across every country, every generation, even every industry. And when we did our latest research, we saw that suddenly the reason for coming into the office is to focus on my work. And that was this major pivotal shift in why they're coming into the office. And yet, when we started understanding what it is they're doing in the office and how well the office supports it, we do spend the most of our time working alone. In fact, it's about 34%. It's come down a little bit over the years. And it's rated as one of the most critical work activities. And yet the office is not really working to support it. It actually got the lowest effectiveness scores. Workers say that they spend 69% of working alone requires high level of concentration. And so it's driving this increased need for privacy at the office. Spaces like quiet tech-free zones that you mentioned, or focus rooms, or even libraries. So we know that providing the right physical work environment that minimizes the noise and distractions and interruptions and really helps people focus on their work and doing their best at work is the key to success.
Very interesting. Your survey also identifies a correlation between worker performance, their willingness to return to the office, and the office environment itself. What, in Gensler's estimation, actually constitutes a high-performing office these days?
Well, the way that we defined it in the research is looking at how well the space works across a number of different variables and metrics. And we look at then all the responses and looks at the top quartile of effective workspace compared to others. And that's really what we're using as a basis for understanding what is a high-performing workplace these days. And what we found is that office workers in the highest quartile, those highest performing workplaces, are almost twice as likely to report that the office positively impacts individual measures like work-life balance, their health and well-being, and individual productivity, but also team outcomes like work, relationships and team productivity. And we also saw some organizational outcome measures such as quality of work and even speed of decision making. And so this data, of being able to understand what drives a high performing workspace really gives us clues as to the types of spaces that are going to provide and support that work.
Mm-hmm. Your survey also reports that workers are clamoring for a richer diversity of experiences. Well, what does that mean exactly? Are they talking about internally within the office itself, or the city and town that they live in? Can you elaborate on that for us?
Sure, I think it's both. You know, that one, I think people are really craving the type of work or a mix of experiences they can't get working remotely. And so that can be within the office, um, and 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 it can also be in the neighborhood. And I think the mixture of both is really what gives that rich diversity. So people not only want an effective workplace that really helps them work best, but they want this mix of experiences that are going to add to the overall quality of the day and how they work. We have seen this occur even pre-pandemic, but it started to really ramp up as we have learned more about how each of us work and how we want to spend our time. So in our survey, it's tough to ask what's missing? What do you wish you had when you don't know the possibilities, right?
Mm,
So we described 8 everyday experiences that respondents could relate to. There's things like a library, a conference center, a residential feel, a boutique hotel, or hospitality kind of infused spaces. And the respondents could actually create their ideal mix by toggling, choosing which ones and toggling the percentage of the work environment that they would like to see in their ideal, totaling to 100. And most people selected 2, 3, maybe 4 of these experiences. And we found that spaces for individual quiet work, such as quiet zones and focus rooms and rest spaces and creative group work, really started having those mix of experiences that people were craving, in terms of that return to the office.
mhm. When I have discussions about this with my friends or with other people that are in the industry, so much of it seems to boil down to socialization. They want to get back to the office because they miss that interaction. Sometimes has less to do with work than it does with the companionship, or however you want to phrase it. But
That's right, just the joy of being together, right?
yeah,
People
yeah,
are the new amenity.
yeah, that's a very good, interesting way of putting it. Can design facilitate that or advance it to any extent?
I think design can play a really powerful role in that because we do crave being together and being part of a community and just being with one another. But we also know we have to balance it with getting our work done. And
Hmm.
a lot of that getting work done is getting down to business and focusing on what it is we're doing and get lost in the joy of that as well. And so how do you in design start to blend one very noisy activity that's very people focused and another that is trying to minimize those distractions in a way that starts to work holistically for everyone?
Hmm. There's been ongoing news reports about developers converting vacant office space to residential or something else. At the very least, the workplace is in transition. And what is your firm's prognosis about the future of the workplace, and how might your design work reflect that perspective? And
Well, I
let me preface this by saying I got an email this morning right before we spoke that said that this headline read something like office sector looking dour for 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's challenges, but there's also exciting opportunities that we have before us when it comes to designing workplaces and our cities. Since the pandemics, there's been a significant recalibration of the role that workplace can play in attracting people back to the office and
Mm,
back to their cities. And indeed, there's this positive role that return to the office plays in making our cities vibrant again. We're seeing companies flee older B and C class buildings for high quality class A buildings that are in great locations. And we're noticing a demand, an increase in the demand for hospitality like amenities in and around these buildings, all in an effort to make the office feel like a destination and an experience multiplier rather than an obligation. So we're seeing that that there's a rise in mixed use developments. That is becoming a desired office location because it not only provides this rich array of experiences, but it can act as an extension of the office. It's almost like creating an ecosystem of work settings, both in the office and outside it, that can start to leverage the office space.
Janet, thanks for taking a couple of minutes to talk about the survey and about your work.
My pleasure.
And thanks to our audience for tuning in again. This is John Caulfield from Building Design Construction Magazine.